Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Happy Tuesday morning. We got a whole lot of Hokies men's and women's basketball to talk to you about. It's episode 344 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, and it starts right now. '30th, 2024, from our studios at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Hey, remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend, or head over to techsideline.com and check out our extensive editorial content. As always, the first month of subscriptions is free. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Across the way, our managing editor, Mr. David Cunningham. To my right, lead analyst and columnist, Chris Coleman. In the fourth chair, our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. And behind the scenes producing today, Mr. Robert Bateman. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. But this episode of TSL is also brought to you by Triumph NIL. Triumph is a unique and experienced sports marketing agency specializing in building custom name, image, and likeness partnerships for student athletes at Virginia Tech. NIL is working at Virginia Tech, and Triumph NIL is a big reason as to why. Visit triumphnil.com to learn more, subscribe, and support the Hokies in NIL. All right, let's start with just a little bit of football today, gentlemen, before we get into our men's and women's basketball content. Very, very small, but something definitely worth noting. We got a new signee for Virginia Tech, Carter Stallard out of Christiansburg, an offensive lineman, and wanted to ask you guys about him because it's the first time Tech's had a signee since 2012 from local Seaburg.
Let me correct you.
Okay.
Commit.
They
don't sign until December. He's next year's class.
Okay. Appreciate that.
So, yeah, he's huge. Like he's listed at 6'8", 315, and he kind of looks every bit of that. Like I've seen pictures of him with Tech's offensive linemen that they signed in this past class, and they're big guys. And despite being a year younger, he's even bigger than they are. So it's great to get that kind of size into the program. At the same time, as an offensive lineman, like especially in this area of the state, at this level of football, you know, he's beating up on a lot of really small guys. Like he's blocking guys that he outweighs by over 100 pounds in some cases. So it's hard to make evaluations sometimes based on that. But I do like his aggressiveness from what I've seen. The frame is obviously there. He's gotten he's been mentored by former Virginia Tech offensive lineman Sergio Render, who played at a high level for Virginia Tech as a 4-year starter back in the day. So, yeah, I always thought Stallard would pick Tech, but you know, he had a good offer list at the same time. So, you know, good pickup.
I appreciate Andy for writing this up in the middle of a basketball game yesterday. What can you tell us about Stallard?
Yeah, I cover first basketball game in like 6 years that I've covered, and of course there's a football commitment right in the middle of it. Yeah, what Chris said, he's huge. I like how he's listed as either 6'7" or 6'8" or 6'7.5" on various sites. It's like when you're at 6'7", does it matter what you're being listed at? You're really tall, and you know, you can't teach 6'8", 320, whatever he weighs right now. It's nice to get that into the program. You're not bringing a guy in. It's like, well, if you add 50 pounds, then he's all of a sudden he's going to be this. You sort of have that ready-made size to start with. You know, somebody local like this. You know, you wouldn't say it's a given that somebody from Christiansburg would sign with the Hokies if they're a really good player, but it's nice not to lose somebody like that that's 6 miles away from campus. So, you know, nice get. Anytime you get an offensive lineman, a big one like that, you know, your first commitment is a quarterback and your next commitment is an offensive tackle, most likely. That's the right way to build an offense, is to get a really talented, skilled guy with the ball in his hands and then protect him with an offensive lineman. So I would imagine the first of many offensive linemen in this class.
Want to talk a little bit of Hokies hoops now. We flip the script to men's basketball. Coming off the heels of a tough one last night against the Duke Blue Devils. Big Monday inside Castle Coliseum, 77-67. The final score. Hokies fall to number 7 Duke. That was after Virginia Tech had rattled off 3 consecutive wins on the road at NC State, home against Boston College and Georgia Tech. Initial thoughts after the loss last night, guys?
I thought Duke played a really good game. Thought their defensive game plan seemed sound. They executed it pretty well. I still thought Virginia Tech missed some shots from the outside they normally make. And I thought Duke really shot well. I mean, they moved the ball well offensively, but then they really shot well on top of that. So I just think you got to tip your cap to Duke. I thought they played. It was probably one of the, considering the short turnaround and where they were playing, I thought that was probably one of the best games they've played this year, all in all.
Yeah, Duke last season, I believe, was 0-4 off 2-day turnarounds. One of them was in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech, a game that the 1-7 Hokies won. This Virginia Tech team is in better shape right now and couldn't win, mostly because Duke played a really good basketball game. I said it last night. Virginia Tech played okay, but against a top 10 team, okay is not going to cut it. I thought Duke was really, really good. I thought John Shire showed why he replaced Coach K. I mean, again, I don't cover Duke, so I follow the ACC, but I don't follow Shire up close. But to just watch the game plan and how it evolved for Duke, you have to guard Hunter Couture and Sean Padula for any opponent, and they kind of let Padula get some looks that he normally takes probably. Sometimes he makes them, sometimes he misses. If he makes them, Virginia Tech's in a lot of games or winning a lot of games. If he misses, you got a chance to win if you're the opponent. Hunter Couture is the key, and I thought Tyrese Proctor, he's 6'5". Mike Young joked after the game kind of that he didn't realize how lengthy Proctor was, but he did a really good job on Couture. They switched Kyle Filipowski onto him some. Duke's game plan was really sound offensively. I thought Duke used its screening action to kind of force Tech into tough defensive rotations instead of, ball screen comes from one side and then it flips at the last second and then they don't even end up using the ball screen, or they do, but they hesitate to where Tech's big, whether it's Lynn Kidd or Elijah Poteet, is up there hedging and then has to roll with the big. Well, that leaves a wide open lane to the hoop. And Chris, I showed you a play before we walked in here. Is of one of Duke's guards literally just beelining right to the bucket after using that screening action. And Duke got a lot of stuff going with that. I thought Tech played, again, okay, only turned it over 4 times. That's a huge positive. Forced 14 turnovers. That's like season high in the ACC play for Duke this year. But Tech, I think it really just came down to 3-point shooting. And when Duke shoots 52, 53, 54% from 3, and you shoot 27%, some looks that you got were, I thought, pretty good looks. Yes, they weren't open looks, and it's hard to get open looks against a team of that caliber, but you have to make them. And Hunter Couture said it best after the game. Duke, the way they played us, we had split-second decisions to make. And if you don't make a split-second decision, your opportunity's gone. And I think that kind of summarizes Tech's night. It had an opportunity and didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think one of the most telling stats from that game was the rebounding. You're going to run into games where you don't shoot well or the other team shoots very well, or both of those, but you look at a 38-20 rebounding margin in this one. They didn't have an offensive rebound in the first half, the Hokies, that is. That's desire and hustle sometimes with rebounding like that. And I don't think Duke was an especially great rebounding team. I think they had struggled in some of their previous games. So I think you look at it from that angle and you go, not the Hokies' best night. And this was a game where they needed to have their best. I mean, this was an opportunity for them to get a marquee win on their schedule. I know Iowa State looks better and better by the week rankings-wise, but they really do not have the cachet of a Duke that you could put there at the top of your resume and go, that's one that you can look at come tournament time if you're the selection committee and you're trying to differentiate from a bunch of resumes that all look the same. Duke is going to look different if you beat them, even if I don't think this Duke team is quite, all caps Duke of the past. So, really a missed opportunity, I think, for the Hokies because, I think, like David said, coming off 2-day turnaround, they've got UNC coming up on Saturday. You wonder if maybe they're looking ahead a little bit. Haven't exactly been the most competitive team this month. They probably should have lost that Clemson game. They did lose to Pitt at home and, come in here and play a very good game against the Hokies, who I don't think had their best. So, a month and a half from now when they're, filling out the tournament field, I think Tech's going to look back at this one and go, that was a real missed opportunity to put a stamp on the season.
Want to take you back to the first half box score. You're sitting there. Jeremy Roach kind of hits that dagger of a 3 right to head into the locker room break after Virginia Tech went on a run, brought this thing back within 3. All of a sudden, the halftime lead for the Blue Devils is moved to 6. But if you sit there and look at the box score and say, Sean Padula is 0 from the floor. You have 0 points by your big men, Malijah Poteet or Lynn Kidd. And the leading scorer for Virginia Tech at that point is MJ Collins. And you're within 6, really almost within 3 besides that one shot. I mean, you got to sit there and say how, but you got to be happy with that.
Yeah. MJ Collins played fantastic.
Yeah.
He gets a lot of shtick from the fans because he has not necessarily been the most consistent scorer. He scored the ball great last night. He had team high 17 points. He scored the ball when needed for Virginia Tech. He kept Tech in that game. The problem is Virginia Tech endured a 7.5 minute scoring drought, field goal drought, I should say, because it got to the free throw line and hit a couple of those. You can't do that against anybody, especially not a top 10 team. At halftime, and I was talking to Andy about this because we were both sitting next to each other on press row. I went back and looked at the Florida Atlantic box score because that was a close game at halftime, and it ended up being a 10-point game last night. Tech had a 9.5 minute scoring drought from the end of the first half to the beginning of the second half. When you play these teams, you have to find a way to get a basket, and that's between the way Duke defended Hunter Couture last night, the way it kind of ran Sean Padula off the three-point line, ran the team off the three-point line as a whole. Tyler Nickel, when he got in the game, he only took one shot. He didn't hit it. Again, like Lynn Kidd came up big, and he had a pretty good second half. But when you're not really getting those contributions from Kidd and Poteet, like it just made it really, really tough. Virginia Tech didn't. We're still shooting like 40-something%, even though it had that drought, which is impressive. But you can't go through something like that against a team like this. And I think that's a lot of credit to Duke and just how it played Virginia Tech. But also, when you, like Andy said, when you look back on this game, Virginia Tech's probably going to be kicking itself because it's like, I thought Tech played in some regards well enough to win, but it didn't defend Duke well enough for large portions of the second half. And in the first half, you have to be able to score the basketball to compete with a team like this. Tech was probably lucky to be able to only be down 3 and then 6, of course. John Shire called that the most important play of the game, that 3 from Jeremy Roach, and I tend to agree. He hit that 3, he hit another 3 when it was a 3-point game with 14 minutes left. In a game like this, you just have to make plays. Tech didn't really do that.
I thought Tech played better last night than they did when they beat Louisville. I thought they played better than they did when they beat Boston College, and maybe 1 or 2 other of their wins this year, maybe even 2. I don't know, but I just thought, you just got to tip your cap. Duke played a really good basketball game. Duke hadn't played a good game, in Castle for quite a while. I think they beat Mike Young's first team, which finished 16-16. But other than that, Tech's beaten them in Castle pretty much every time they've played recently. So I think maybe part of them were a little bit tired of that too. I know Duke turns over a lot of players, and some of those guys had never played in Castle in the past.
But remember what happened last year. I mean, Filipowski getting punched in the throat by MJ Collins. Yeah. And this is one of those weird teams where Duke returned a lot of guys.
Yeah,
Filipowski,
it doesn't happen. Yeah.
Jeremy Roach is back. Mm-hmm. He was the player of the game in my opinion. Tyrese Proctor's back. Like, this was a very
Ryan Young.
Yeah, this was not a freshman Duke team.
Mark Mitchell played last year. Actually, a lot of these guys. McCain was
basically everybody except for McCain and Foster.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that's because Shire's got a new approach. He said we're kind of trying to get away from the whole one and done.
And they should.
Yeah.
They absolutely right decision, because he's a good coach. Like I thought they were so very well prepared last night, and they executed pretty well on both sides of the ball. If they can keep players as opposed to like teaching brand new players a new system every year, and I know, well, those one and done guys are very talented, but how many one and done teams are winning national titles these days? Not as many, right? So I think for Duke to get back to what Duke once was, they needed to change their model, and if he's doing that, props to him.
Well,
Are you calling out Coach K and his model?
I did not mention Coach K.
Chris Coleman, I think, is calling out Coach K
I have
as
said
an
that
outdated
before.
model of basketball. He needed to go for a new, fresh perspective at Duke. I don't want to put words in your mouth here. Is that correct paraphrase?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Speaking of Coach K, it's interesting. This is kind of on topic, kind of off topic, but I heard I was out to dinner with somebody a few months ago who has some connections at Duke, and he said they've had some issues down there with the whole transition. Even though Shire's a Duke guy, it's like somebody says, well, Shire's the head coach, his pitcher needs to be right here at the end of the hall or whatever. I'm just using this as an example. Old school Duke people are like, oh, but Coach K's pitcher has always been there, So even though he's a Duke guy, replacing Coach K, they're still getting pushback on certain things in there. I was just using that as one small example, but it's interesting in those places where coaches stay entrenched for so long. I'll be interested to see what Syracuse, I brought up Syracuse this time, by the way, not Gio. Interested to see what they do with their scheduling model from here going forward, because their scheduling model this year, it might have been too late for their new coach to do anything about it, but it's very much slanted towards the RPI. Like if you look at their RPI ranking, which is like top 15 compared to their net, which is like 77.
Maybe Jim Boeheim doesn't have a Ken Palm subscription.
Maybe he doesn't. But yeah, Syracuse has been doing things very much the old school RPI model of scheduling, even though the RPI isn't used to determine the NCAA tournament field anymore. So you've seen some things change at Duke, which I think is better for Duke, and that's something to look out for Syracuse. Now back to Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one thing when you mention players staying, you look at the other best team in the ACC. Ironically, Duke and North Carolina play this weekend. Top 10 game in Chapel Hill. College Game Day will be there. But North Carolina has a bunch of veterans too. Freshman point guard Elliot Kiddo, but everybody else are veterans. Like you have to have experience now, just in the portal era. Experience pays off. Them getting Harrison Ingram in from Stanford. Armando Bacot is surprisingly still
it feels
there.
like he's been there.
In my opinion, I'm not going to name any
Yeah.
names here, but they don't have a ball hog on their team this year. So
Yeah,
I think they're
Davis
playing better team basketball.
RJ Davis is playing phenomenal too. So yeah, I think it pays off to have veterans. Freshmen, Coach K did so well with freshmen for a long time, but you really have to go back to, I guess his 2015 team where they had Jaleel Okafor and some of the Tyus Jones maybe, that Justice Winslow, like that Duke team was a bunch of freshmen. Obviously, the Kentucky team with Anthony Davis, but it's not a consistent thing. It takes a lot to win with freshmen.
The Duke team with Zion was the most talented basketball team I think I've ever seen in person, outside of maybe one of those Carolina teams when Tech first got in the ACC that had like Ty Lawson and Hansbrough and that group. That was really good. But that team with Zion was insanely talented. And like Tech easily could have knocked them out of the Sweet 16 in that game. That game went down to the wire. So it takes a lot more than just talent. Yeah. And I think
it takes experience.
Yeah,
that's I think what you see.
I think for Duke, you just go out there and you sign 4 McDonald's All-Americans in the #1 class in the country, and they're all going to be one and done. I think in the way that's almost a lazy style of recruiting. It's like, we know we can get these guys, so that's what we're going to do. But are you really thinking about what's the best decision for your basketball program?
Well, the crazy thing is they're still getting those guys, and now they're convincing them to stick around. I think NIL plays a big factor in that for sure. But like Filipowski was one of the top guys. Coming up this next year, they have one of the top guys coming in for next year's class. And then, top 10 for, I want to say it was McCain was top 10 and Foster was top
4. They have 4 top 10 freshmen.
Yeah.
In this year's class, and like only 2 or 3 of them are playing.
Right. and they're still sticking around.
We can talk about the approach and should they go after all these one and dones? Like Virginia Tech would kill for one player like that. Like you could talk from afar about the approach, but for most schools, like even landing one of those guys would be a dream scenario, and the fans would lose their minds.
I think if Tech got a one and done player, I'm not sure we'd be able to afford the rest of the roster. I mean, from an NIL standpoint.
That's fair. That's fair. I think we'd take one in a heartbeat, though.
It might be 5-on-1 basketball if that was the case, man. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
We could get you out there, though. Lace them up.
I don't think you want that.
I wanted to talk about the free throws, guys, because it's worth noting, and it kind of almost flew under the radar a little bit. Tech went into last night number 2 in the country, number 1 in the ACC in free throw shooting percentage. They were above 80%. That is really, really impressive. It's a big reason as to why they've been winning games, especially nailing off those 3 consecutive W's. Last night, that you don't want to say falls apart. I mean, they went 16-16 against Boston College. They missed just 2 in their last outing against Georgia Tech. Last night, 9-12 from the stripe, so didn't get to the stripe as much.
75%.
But it was when the misses came, is my point here. You had 3 misses in a row, and that was when it was a single-digit ball game. Padula misses 1, that's unlike him. And then Poteet misses 2, which, believe it or not, is actually unlike him, too. He shoots the ball above 70%. So it wasn't necessarily that they missed him. They still didn't have a bad night. It was just the timeliness of it, David.
I wrote my... Sorry.
No. You go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. Whoever wants it.
Okay, I wrote the article, so I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
I wrote an Inside the Numbers article today on the free throw shooting. And I ran the numbers yesterday, and I'm sitting there like, should I write this today and run it today? If I do that, they'll probably go like 7 of 15 from the line tonight, and I'll totally jinx them. So I decided to wait and write it today. But I did post a couple of the numbers on Twitter, but other than that, I waited until today.
Did you have a cheeseburger?
No. I mean, I tried to restart the cheeseburger streak for the Clemson game, and it worked. And then I did it the next game against Miami, and they lost. So it's over and done with now.
Okay.
Yeah. I paid $19 for a sandwich, a bag of chips, and a water.
Would you go to Five Guys?
No, I went to Heathwood Market in Castle.
Oh.
Yeah. $19.
That's tough.
Free throws?
Free throws. Yeah, second in the country. So you've got to go you go back 10 years in the ACC, and there's only been one ACC team to shoot a higher percentage in free throws than Virginia Tech is shooting this year. Hunter Couture's 42nd nationally. Lynn Kidd is 50th nationally in free throw percentage. He's the only player in the top 50 in the country taller than 6'7". I think there's only 2 guys who rank 51st to 100th who are taller than 6'10". So, last year and the year before, there was only 1 guy who was 6'10" or taller who finished in the top 100 in free throw shooting. So Lynn Kidd is like one of the most unique players in college basketball, or even in the history of Virginia Tech basketball, when it comes to free throw shooting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
What else does anybody have on this Duke game before we touch on the win over Georgia Tech, because we have not talked to our squad here, our listeners since then, and then we kind of move into our women's basketball conversation.
I was surprised that Tech was in the bonus for the final 12, 13 minutes of the second half yesterday and didn't really get to the line.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little surprised about that. But this is also a Tech team that doesn't necessarily get to the line a lot.
Will and I were talking about this in the seats when we were watching the game. Actually, it was both halves. They got Duke up to 6 fouls with 6 or 7 minutes in the first half, and I don't think Duke didn't get called for another foul until there was about a minute left. So they couldn't take advantage of it. And that was also part of when, in the second half, when they got Duke in the bonus and they couldn't take advantage of it, Filipowski was also on the bench in foul trouble.
He had 4 fouls.
Yeah, and I thought there were some times where Duke actually played better without him. I'd have to go back and watch the film.
I agree. I would agree with that.
I'd tap Will and be like, all right, he's out of the game. We need to make a run. And then Duke would make a run instead. And then it happened again. It kept happening, and I'm like, I just hope he stays in the game at this point. But I think no matter how you slice it, though, Duke played a really good game.
Yeah, Gio, I think this was like Andy said, this was an opportunity. Virginia Tech had a chance, and we already kind of outlined the situation Duke was in. Virginia Tech had won 5 of the last 6 in Castle against Duke. Duke's coming off. Duke and Tech both played on Saturday, but then Duke has to travel. Duke, you have to prep on a dime. Duke also has Carolina on Saturday. Just seemed like the perfect conditions for a Virginia Tech kind of storm to win this game. I thought the fans were really good last night. I thought Castle Guard was solid, very, very loud. I thought the place was going to explode when Filipowski missed the first free throw for Bacon. This was a chance, and I think if you're Tech, you just needed a smidge bet more offensively, and I think defensively, like there was a point in the second half where it's probably about the same time Andy finished his commitment article on Stallard and looked up. Duke's shooting like 75% in the half.
I think they start 9 of 13,
something like that.
9
Yeah.
of 12.
I mean, just you can't let a team shoot like that. You have to lock down and play better defense, and it was across the board. And I thought Tech's defense was good at times, bad at times. Tech didn't really get a chance to go run out and transition at all. I thought Duke was able to kind of slow down and make Tech play in the half court, which is fine. Tech's comfortable doing that, but that means you don't get as many easy opportunities. So, yeah, I think Mike Young said it best. He's like, sometimes you just get outplayed, and Duke was better, and now Virginia Tech kind of turns its attention to Miami. That's a big win, almost a must win. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a sec.
Yep.
And, Tech does not have that necessarily marquee win. Iowa State's a good win. Clemson's a good win. Depending on the day, NC State and Boise State are quadrant 1 wins. But, man, a win over Duke would have really injected, like, new life into this team.
Well, they didn't get it, David, so stop making us sad. Georgia Tech, you thought it was one of Tech's best performances, if not the best performance of the year. 91-67 was the final.
I think you have to say that. I mean, just a conference game, you win by 24. And you saw what I've been talking about in the net, about how it's not as much about who you play, but how you play, as opposed to the old RPI. It's like the exact opposite. So, Tech won in a blowout style, so they moved up 8 spots in the net because you get that extra little bonus for margin of victory, and it really helps you in the in your efficiency ratings. Obviously, when you win by 24, you're very efficient. Whereas if they'd gone out there and won that game by 6 points, they might have moved up just a couple of spots or something like that. I also thought Georgia Tech's really bad.
Yeah.
But so that has something to do with it. I think Tech's playing their best basketball of the season right now by far. They just ran into a team with several future NBA players on it who played one of their best games of the season. Unfortunately, it was bad timing for that from Virginia Tech's perspective. But overall, I think Tech's playing good basketball right now.
All right. Oh, you got something, David?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is Virginia Tech's best basketball of the season. You ran into a buzzsaw. Duke is a buzzsaw. Duke is going to be probably a top 4 seed come March. That's just the way things shape out. Like Andy said, this is not all caps Duke, but this is a pretty good Duke team that I think is playing better basketball as well. And the trick now for Virginia Tech is to capitalize on the Georgia Tech game. I asked some of the guys last night, okay, well, you're 5-5 in the ACC now. Like I know it feels weird because it feels like a missed opportunity. But for Virginia Tech to start 2-4 and then be 5-5, that's a pretty impressive turnaround.
And we won't know if it's a missed opportunity until March.
Yeah, and again, this Virginia Tech team can still go accomplish something. It has to win some of the right games. Starts with Miami. I think Carolina's a long stretch, but I think if there are 10 games left in the ACC, Tech's halfway through. To be sitting at 5-5 is not a bad place to be. It gives you a chance. Now Tech's probably going to have to win at least 6, if not 7 games to really be in that conversation. It's going to have to win the right ones. But I did like how Tech played against Georgia Tech. I liked how Tech played against Boston College. Hunter Couture, I thought, put it well. I mean, he said, even though we lost this game, we made strides. And I think you are seeing it. Virginia Tech is playing really good defense right now. That didn't necessarily show up at times last night, because I thought Duke was really good offensively. And Duke was 12th in adjusted offensive efficiency coming in. That's just how good it is. Yeah. I think offensively, Tech's starting to find something. If Tech can continue to get those kind of contributions, maybe not 17 a night, but from MJ Collins, I think Robbie Barron's playing better. Tech needs Tyler Nickel to be a little bit more consistent. You have to remember Mekhi Long didn't play. That was his third straight game he missed because of a
Pound for pound,
because
the
of a
Tech's
knee.
best rebounder.
Yeah, and I think he probably would have helped on the
huge.
defensive end a little bit. Maybe not offensively, but I think Lynn Kidd and Elijah Poteet combining for 36 points, Robbie Barron chipping in 14. I mean, that front court trio had 50 and 19 and shot 17 to 25 for Virginia Tech against Georgia Tech. That is really good.
Georgia Tech, who beat Duke, by the way.
Virginia Tech showed over these last 3 games that it can win in different ways, which we'll talk about with the women. But like, you go on the road, you beat NC State, you turn the ball over 20 times, and you still find a way to win. You come back, you don't turn the ball over as much, still probably too much. Champedule and Hunter Couture go off, yet you find a way to win. Then it's not Hunter Couture and Champedule's night, it's the Bigs' night. They combined for 50 points, 36 between the two fives. You find a way to win that way. Tech only turned the ball over 4 times. You remember we were having this conversation last week? We were like, Tech is never going to win a game again if it turns the ball over 20 times. Tech turned it over 4 times.
Yeah.
Like, Tech is making strides. You probably just can't really see it because of last night's game.
Oddly enough, Tech's 2 best turnover games this year have come in 2 losses.
Yeah.
South Carolina and Duke. They turned it over 6 times against South Carolina, 4 times against Duke, and lost both games. Yeah. 6 of 22 from 3 last night, 7 of 22 against South Carolina.
It's putting the whole thing together, Gio. It's playing good defense. It's not turning the ball over. It's hitting your threes when they come. And Virginia Tech will get there. The question is if Virginia Tech can get there in time. Because if it doesn't get there for another couple weeks, it's going to miss out on an opportunity like Miami on Saturday. It's going to miss out on opportunities to pick up what might be Q1 wins against Pitt and Syracuse. Again, Carolina's a long shot, but Tech has to win now. The margin for error is so thin now. Duke would have made it a little bit wider, but again, this team is, I think, starting to find a little bit more of a groove.
So, Andy, I've got a question for you. It's been a while since you covered basketball. I know. What's the best basketball team you've seen play in person? College basketball team. Do you have an opinion
basketball
on that?
team.
Yeah.
Can it be an opposing team?
Sure.
As I play.
Yeah.
I saw them play probably 6 or 7 times in the 2000 season. The Michigan State team, Mateen Cleaves, Mo Peterson, Jason Richardson, Zach Randolph on that team. It was a good team.
You know, Roanoke.
They beat the Badgers in the Final Four as well.
Roanoke briefly had a minor league basketball team, and I think Mateen Cleaves played for them.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. I'll have to look that up on his Wikipedia.
I remember it being at the Final Four. I was a student reporter in my senior year of college, and it's in the RCA Dome in Indianapolis, and we're in like the auxiliary media seating. So we're like in the front row of the actual stands, and behind us was like Mateen Cleaves' family, like shouting like Flintstones because they were from Flint, Michigan. So that was like the team nickname and stuff. They would not stop the entire game. It was pretty obnoxious, but it was kind of cool to cover at the time. And yeah, I'm sure I've seen other really talented teams over. Yeah, I did used to cover quite a bit of basketball back in the day before I veered towards football. But that's one that sticks out in my mind. That pretty good team there.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you what, that 2018-19 season, there were a lot of good basketball teams in the ACC. I mean, that Virginia team that went and won the national championship. Hate to say it, sorry.
Louisville was really good.
Louisville's good. Duke, I mean, that team with Duke and with Zion Williamson, that was a really good team. I got to watch some really good basketball on the women's side last year too. Anytime you get to see South Carolina play, South Carolina's a beast. Getting to see Caitlin Clark play, those teams were really, really good. And honestly, what's crazy is some of those, maybe not the best, but some of the most consistent teams I've seen, some of those NC State women's basketball teams over the last handful of years. I mean, they ripped off 3 straight ACC championships like it was ACC tournament championships like it was nothing.
Cunane. Yeah, she was pretty good. There was a lot of talent there. So you got Miami coming up on Saturday. Then you're at Notre Dame. Kind of a must-win,
And,
I think we can say.
That's a week off, too.
Right, you have a whole week stretch. That's Saturday to Saturday. Florida State after that, Carolina. We don't really have to get into the meat and potatoes here because David, I think, nailed it. The margin for error is slim, and there's some games that you simply cannot lose here. You're talking at Pitt, at Notre Dame. You got to beat Florida State when they come here this time around, things like that.
The 3 I think that you have no business losing are Louisville and the 2 Notre Dame games.
Yeah.
Like those are quad 4 games. Absolutely have to go 3-0 in those games. And that gets you to 16 wins. And you know, we don't know what the magic number is because it depends on what everybody else does and your number of quad 1 wins and things like that. So other than that, we don't know what's going to end up being a must win. Like we won't know what was a must win until the season ends and we look back on it. But I can tell you what, we can't lose any of those 3 that I just mentioned.
But Virginia Tech, I think, probably has to play like every game's a must win.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
That's kind of, I mean, yes. Okay, so say Virginia Tech goes unscathed in those 3 games and is sitting at 16-8, and 8-5. That leaves you with 7 other games. You probably need 4 of those, and
5 to be safe.
Yeah. And so so that's saying you got to beat Virginia at home. You got to beat Florida State at home. You probably have to go to Pittsburgh or go to Syracuse and take 1.
Miami.
Or 2.
Yeah.
I think the most important game for Virginia Tech is the Miami game. That's a team you should have beaten in Castle, probably would have beaten in Castle if you had Hunter Couture. This is a Miami team that, as Gio mentioned to us when we were prepping for the show, that's been banged up lately. That team was banged up when it came to Castle the first time. That's a Q1 game. On the road, Miami's good enough that it will stay a Q1 because it's on the road. If you can go in there, Miami and Tech are always close. Go in there and get a win. You're above 500 still. Or you're back above 500. You're 6-5 in the ACC, but you have a Q1 win on the road. And I was running numbers on Bartorvik this morning, and you know, if Tech gets about 7 wins and gets the right combination of wins, like that Miami game is crucial. But Tech could very well be in the tournament field come the end of the regular season by just like winning the right games. You win at Miami, you win at Pitt. Those are both Q1s.
Right.
Syracuse could be if Syracuse continues to play well. So it's like the season is nowhere close to being over. But if you go to Louisville and you for some reason slip up, you don't deserve to be in the NCAA tournament.
Right, as Clemson found out last year.
Yeah, or Notre Dame. And guess what? Like Virginia might start to play better. But what does Virginia have on its resume? A big fat L against Notre Dame on the road.
Yeah.
Like, you can't lose to the teams that are in the very, very, very bottom tier in the ACC if you want to get into the tournament.
It just crosses out one of your Q1 wins if you do that.
Essentially.
Yeah.
All right, let's flip the script here. Talk women's basketball. You're talking about a team that is finding their groove once again. Things are going very, very well for Kenny Brooks and company, coming off the heels of a win on the road inside the Dome. Took down number 22 Syracuse.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Syracuse
here we go.
again.
Here we go.
Every episode, it's Syracuse. My goodness.
I know. I cannot wait to read the comments once again. Beat Georgia Tech as well. Before that, we already talked about it. They beat Clemson inside Castle Coliseum. Some trends here with this team. You're seeing more lineups with both Elizabeth Kitley and Clara Strack. You're seeing Olivia Sumiel being inserted back into the starting lineup. She's been fantastic. And then Georgia Amor returning from injury has been lights out for the Hokies. David, you talked about, and Kenny talked about, and kudos to you for bringing it up to Kenny during the press conferences, her pace has been exceptional the last couple of games.
You hate to say it, you remember the last podcast we did where it was kind of like, not that it's a good thing, but like maybe it helps everybody figure out some stuff. George Amor sitting out a game, I think that helped her reset a little bit. And she seems to be fine. She's playing good basketball. She was the AC Player of the Week. She had 24, I believe, against Georgia Tech, and then went and had a casual 29 in the JMA Wireless Dome. She's playing fantastic basketball. She's limiting turnovers, and she's running the offense so well right now. Elizabeth Kitley did not have a good game up in Syracuse, but Georgia Amor, I don't think, if you're Virginia Tech, you never really felt like you didn't have control of the game because Amor kind of just maintained it. There was the 1 second quarter where Georgia Amor, with about a minute and a half to go in the first quarter, she picked up 2 fouls. Carly Wenzel has to come in and kind of slow things down and run it. Virginia Tech essentially played that entire second quarter without Georgia Amor. Was up about 11. The lead was cut to 4, I believe, or 6 at halftime. To be like, that is a luxury to have, to be able to go into halftime without your starting point guard when you're all like, essentially one All-American spent an entire quarter on a bench and the other All-American's not playing well, and you're beating a top 25 team on the road by 4 at half.
So she missed a whole quarter basically and still had how many points?
29.
29.
She had 13 in the first quarter, and then so I mean, that's a credit to Carly Wenzel and Matilda Eck and Kayla King. I thought they were exceptional. But yeah, Gio, you mentioned her pace. She's speeding it up but slowing it down, but she's not like playing out of sorts. Like, she's kind of just letting the game come to her, and she's taking what the defense is giving her. And I know sometimes it's like, what in the world is she doing? She's dribbling around in a circle. She had that one play, Gio, where she got, like, she was defended kind of like with 7 seconds on the shot clock, I think, and she got down really, really, really low, and she like basically dribbled really quickly, looked like she was on the Harlem Globetrotters, and got fouled. And like, you know, shot clock resets to 20, and Tech essentially has a whole new possession. Like, she's playing smart basketball. She's not really trying to force it, and I think that's good. And I think as a result, everybody else is feeding off of it. She draws so much attention. And when you can get 14 from Matilda Eck, 13 from Kayla King, Carly Wenzel can chip in 7. Olivia Sumiel hits a huge corner 3. That's like back-to-back games where she's hit a huge corner 3. She had 12 rebounds. Everything's coming together. And that's without mentioning, you know, the other All-American, I should say, that, you know, didn't have a good night, her first off night really of the year, and Virginia Tech was still able to come away with the win. That is like the recipe for success, being able to overcome quote unquote adversity, and when stuff doesn't go your way and players are having an off night, other people finding a way to step up.
How much can you speak more about what does that say because up to that point, Tech had not shown that without a superstar, whether it's Georgia or Liz, playing at their best, that they can win ball games, right? And then this was the first time. I mean, you can make the argument Georgia didn't play against Clemson and then Tech looked really good, but there were some hiccups, and that was learning opportunities across the board. Obviously, they struggled in the second half without Georgia against Duke. This was the first time your superstar, I mean, she is on the floor. She is drawing attention, doesn't have her best, and they're able to contribute in other ways.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the role players and how well they're playing. And when I say role players, I don't mean that in a demeaning way. They're just not the 2 All-Americans. The other players on the team, for you to be successful, like I compare it to that Duke team we saw last night. Kyle Filipowski is an All-American. He's one of the best players in the country. He's going to get all of the focus, but you have to have guys that are going to step up when needed. Jeremy Roach stepped up and hit 4 threes last night. Maybe the play of the game in that Syracuse game, I would say 2 plays. Carly Wenzel, basically at the end of the first half, driving to the rim, getting a layup to go. And Matilda Eck had one where she got the rebound, and instead of throwing an outlet pass, she dribbled it up the floor, walked up to the top of the key, and hit a 3. Like, it's that confidence. You need those players to feel confident and to step up and contribute. And it says a lot. I think it was a little bit worrying when Elizabeth Kitley just weirdly has an off night. She's been fantastic all year. And for whatever reason, she's getting good looks, her normal shots not falling. And then Georgia Amor's not on the floor. But Carly Wenzel, I thought that was a big moment for her and her development. Like, Kenny Brooks was able to keep her on the floor for essentially the entire second quarter, She barely turns the ball over, maybe like once. She had a pass at like half court that got picked off, and then she came down and helped Tech set back up and run the offense, and Tech, I believe, scored off of it. You're seeing her maturity. That's big, because when Georgia Amore's not on the floor, Tech needs somebody like that. Kayla King, we know what she brings. Matilda Eck, right? And then getting, like, Syracuse coming in was one of the best rebounding teams in the conference. Olivia Summiel has 12. Essentially matches, the name's slipping my mind, but one of Syracuse's best rebounders. Like, you have to have those efforts from everybody else. And the way, that's what makes a good team. And then it helps when you have two All-Americans, and when they're on, they're on. And, Georgia Amore, again, like, casually had 29 after missing an entire quarter of basketball. Like, those things don't just happen to anybody from anybody. That just kind of tells you how well she's playing right now. So I think it's, again, the perfect storm right now. We talked about how well the men are playing. I think the women are, like, full foot on the gas right now, but obviously it's only going to get more difficult from here.
Well, Virginia Tech, and by the way, you were right. Kira Wood had 12 rebounds. So did Olivia Summiel. That was the leader for each team. Virginia Tech did win. The rebound totals, though, in this ball game, 47-39 against the Orange. Want to talk, David, about the fact that Tech defensively, Deasia Fair averaging over 21 points per game coming into this game for Syracuse. She's kind of the heart and soul of that team. Tech held her to just 16, and it wasn't just the fact that what she was able to do in points. It just felt like Tech was kind of able to neutralize her, more of an eye test type of thing.
Yeah, I think offensive defense, not letting Syracuse get offensive rebounds was huge, because I believe Kenny Brooks said on the pregame and postgame show when talking to Evan Hughes on the Virginia Tech Sports Network, just that Syracuse is the best offensive rebounding team, one of the best rebounding teams, but best offensive rebounding team in the conference. And Tech really neutralized that, didn't really let Hughes do anything there. Again, credit to Summiel. But to limit Deasia Fair up there, I think in all ACC Player of the Year consideration, with like Elizabeth Kelly, Georgia Amore, Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame. Tech held the Orange to 33% from the floor. That's impressive, and I think that probably flies under the radar because of Tech playing well offensively. But that's the big reason why Virginia Tech won 75-62, I believe it was.
That is correct.
To be able to hold the team and to play defense like that, I think a lot of it was because of the 2-3 zone. Funny how you go up to Syracuse and you play a 2-3 zone and it works for you. But
taste of your own medicine.
Well, yeah, except it wasn't a game, it wasn't a men's game. But yeah, I think Tech's finding something with that 2-3 zone. I think Tech's playing more disciplined. I think if Tech can continue to rebound the ball out of the zone, it'll be really effective. The tough part with Tech is it's gotten beat in a handful of games this year by just players slashing to the rim. And I think the zone in a lot of cases eliminates that, forces people to shoot from the outside. We saw Florida State earlier this year. Sarah Bigetti had like 31 points and couldn't miss from three. Sometimes people are going to have a good night and beat you from there, but a lot of times it's going to work. And that's one of the reasons I think why Tech was able to slow down Fair and Syracuse.
David, want to bring up the point, and probably going to get crucified in the comments. It's okay. We're starting to build this whole anti-hero mantra anyway with all this. But but Syracuse is good. I mean, 22 in the country to go on the road. Tough environment. This is a very big win for Tech, especially because you lost on the road at Florida State. You lost on the road at Duke. To go beat a top 25 team, Syracuse or not, at their house, that's a big staple for Tech. That was a hump that they hadn't necessarily gotten over yet this season.
Let me say this so people don't just get mad at you. Syracuse is very, very good. Like, this was a team that had only had one loss in the ACC, was tied with Louisville for the conference lead. Tech, Syracuse, and Carolina are now tied for second behind Louisville. Syracuse swept Notre Dame this season. Notre Dame went and beat UConn on Sunday. And Syracuse went and beat Notre Dame by 10+ in South Bend on Thursday. Like, to go up there and to essentially nullify a little bit Deasia Fair, that was a pretty impressive Syracuse crowd in terms of a women's game from what I've seen recently. That is I think Virginia Tech's first big win this year outside of NC State, because NC State, of course, is big.
Right.
Number 3 team in the country at that time. NC State's 18-2. Tech's gonna have another shot at the Wolfpack next week. But to beat Syracuse, to beat a ranked ACC team on the road, a team that's playing really good basketball, that's going to be in the NCAA tournament hunt, and is going to be probably a top 4, 5, 6 seed at the way Syracuse is playing right now. This and I also think this is one meeting of the year. You don't get Syracuse again. You lose that, and who knows what happens at the end of the season when you need it for tiebreaker purposes. So it's a big win for a lot of reasons. It's a confidence booster. You show you can go win on the road against a top 25 team. I believe it was Tech's 3rd game on the road against a top 25 team this year. Lost at LSU, lost at Florida State. I was a little, maybe I don't know if skeptical is the right word, but we saw Tech go on the road twice a week or two ago to Florida State and Duke and play well for stretches of those games and then not be able to hold on. And to do so when Elizabeth Kitley's not playing well, when you're dealing with George Amore's foul trouble, I think it says a lot. This team is maturing and is really finding itself.
Did you see what Duke did to Florida State?
42 point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This league is insane.
So like that,
and then Duke
that
lost the next game.
That's crazy. But like the Duke loss on the road is like, when they play like that, I mean, Florida State's obviously good. They beat Tech, right?
Yeah.
But they lost by 42 to Duke. It's a tough league, man. It's like you don't play your best on any given night, you're going to get beat.
Yeah. I think that's what's impressive about Tech. It's like Tech's 2 losses are to Florida State and Duke, both on the road. But Tech doesn't really have that loss that's tripped them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Like Carolina, who Virginia Tech has on Sunday after UVA. Well, Carolina went to Charlottesville and got waxed by 15. This is a UVA team that lost to Pitt, the worst team in the league, last week. Like, again, it's everybody can beat everybody.
There's more parity this year, I think, than there normally.
It's feeling slightly eerily similar to last year, right? Where even though it wasn't back-to-back losses, these Florida State Duke loss kind of feels like when Tech early on in conference play lost to Clemson and lost to Miami, and then remember they didn't lose again, right?
They lost to Duke.
If they manage to not lose again with the schedule they've got coming up, then like whatever job Kenny Brooks did last year is an even better job this year.
So let's talk about that gauntlet coming up. This is actually unbelievable. You have 9 games left. 5 of those 9 games are against top 25 teams. Coming up, you got UVA inside the Castle. No slouch in the Cavaliers, not this year. At number 24 UNC. And then on Thursday after the Sunday, you're going on the road to play a top 5 NC State team down in Raleigh at Reynolds Coliseum. You know that Tech's only won there once in program history, and it was last year. Boston College, that's a game you should win inside Castle. Then you got Duke at home. You're at Louisville. You play UNC again, this time at home. You're at number 14 Notre Dame, and you end the year on the road at UVA. Like, if that's not a gauntlet, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And it'd be one thing if one of the other teams Tech played twice was not UVA, but UVA is a rivalry game. And it's one of those things where, everybody always, use the joke, oh, throw the records out when those teams play. But it's like, I've seen really, really good Virginia Tech teams lose to not very good UVA teams in the past, and vice versa. Like, it just happens. And, Tech's going to have to show up on Thursday night. Tech can't be looking to Carolina. Tech can't be looking to NC State. And, this is where Kenny Brooks is going to make his money. I mean, this is like, this is where the team is really you're really going to learn how good Virginia Tech is. Is Tech going to be able to go on the road back-to-back games and win at Carolina and at NC State? Those are going to be 2 tough environments. Tech did it last year. Took a buzzer beater from Elizabeth Kitley and a terrific performance in Reynolds. But like this league is really, really good, and it's only going to get more difficult. But I looked at the latest bracketology this morning, and Virginia Tech's projected as a number 4 seed. To be a number 4 seed halfway through, that's a good spot. If you remember, Tech was not a number 1 seed until it won the ACC championship last year.
Yeah.
So there's still a long way to go. Lots of basketball to be played. Tech can really boost its resume by winning some of these games. Not going to be easy at all.
You're about to find out whether Tech's going to be a 3 seed or a 6 seed.
Yeah.
basically.
And regardless, they
Or
can make
something
some
in between,
noise.
right?
Really. I mean, this is a team that I think at this point, matched up one-on-one, can contend with anybody in the country. No doubt, especially the way they're playing as of late. Anything else, guys, on women's hoops before we let everyone go?
I think we covered.
Think we nailed it?
I think we covered
I
it.
think
Yeah.
you got it.
Sweet. What's coming up on Tech Sideline this week?
It was a big recruiting weekend this past week, so I'll spend some time compiling a list of some of the names who visited and run that article probably either tomorrow or Thursday.
Sweet.
And then normal Q&A. I think, Andy, you've got some depth chart stuff coming up.
We're going to project some depth charts, what it might look like next year. I'm going to do the thing where I go back 5 years, look at the signing class from 5 years ago. I always enjoy look back some of the names we forgot over the years that have didn't pan out or went to other places, or some of them are just like crazy to look back. Like I remember one of the first ones we were doing was like James Farrow, that cornerback who was a rapper all of a sudden or something like that.
He
It's like,
transferred to the hip hop portal.
well, he was San Diego. He went to San Diego first, and then like dropped that and became a rapper. I think he goes by Pharaoh or something like that. But
Oh, he's still a rapper.
yeah, I think so. I don't know. I haven't kept up with his.
You haven't? You don't celebrate his
rapping
collection?
career. But no, it's interesting to look back and see where some of these guys ended up, and then you try to think back of how hyped they were and how excited the message boards were when these guys signed. And of course, they're excited about everybody, but not everybody's going to pan out. So I like looking back at that stuff.
Now I know what I'm going to do this afternoon. I'm going to try to find some James Farrow rap songs on the
Jesus.
internet.
Nice.
He's from Minnesota, so we have a common bond there.
Same type of music.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I'll have more basketball stuff this week. Again, Tech has UVA in Castle on Thursday. I'll be in Chapel Hill on Sunday and at NC State next week. The men are off next week.
Yep.
After Miami. Again, that's a big one.
You get a little bit of a break.
Honestly, a must win. Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, you'll be writing, but, you know.
Baseball, softball stuff. We'll announce some of that stuff soon.
Media day tomorrow.
Yeah, baseball, softball, media day. So we'll have some baseball, softball content coming soon. Very excited for that. I'll talk about more of that soon.
Let me throw in that wrestling beat UNC 33-3.
Yes.
Yes.
Wrestling crushed. And
That's as big of a blowout as you get in wrestling.
yeah,
right there.
they won 9 of 10 bouts.
That's
and
like
by
winning a
double-
football game 62-7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wrestling, Jack Brizanine and Ivan, Russian Hokie, they'll be in Charlottesville on Friday for wrestling.
Do we want to announce our baseball, softball writers? Are we holding on to that secret information?
Yeah, well, I was gonna wait until they write some stuff first.
All right, we'll hang on to that.
and then we can talk about it and maybe have them on and.
And the only reason I
figure
say
it
that
out.
is because the legend of Chris Hirons has moved on
know.
away from Blacksburg on a bigger and better opportunity.
Let me add, while we're on here, that we have a demographic survey on the site that we really like everybody to fill out. Those of you who visit the site regularly have probably already seen a link to it or are on our email list have seen a link to it. But those of you who just watch the podcast, which is particularly students, I know more students watch the podcast that is indicated in our survey that I've seen so far. So for advertising purposes and future content purposes, we'd really appreciate it if everybody gets on the site and fills out our demographic survey. It's on the homepage of the site right now. Probably.
It's like 15 minutes or 15 questions. It'll
15
take you
questions.
like
It'll take
2
you-
minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Small part of your day. So please fill that out for us.
Awesome. Fun week coming up for Virginia Tech. We'll see you next week, though. That does it for episode 344, the Tech Sideline Podcast. One more time, today's show was brought to you, as always, by First Bank and Trust Company, our presenting sponsor. First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to Tech Sideline, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Bank with First Bank and Trust Company. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Today's show also brought to you by Triumph NIL as well. For Robert Bateman, for Andy Bitter, for David Cunningham, for Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long from Blacksburg, and we'll see you next week.